Thank you for staying with us on the conversation. On August 22nd to 23rd, 2025, prosecutors in the Democratic Republic of Congo asked the court to sentence former President Joseph Kabila to death in a trial held in his absence. Now, they accused him of serious crimes, including treason, murder, and torture, and of backing the M23 rebel group. The Senate later removed his lifetime immunity so that he could be prosecuted. Now, Kabila, who led the country from 2001 to 2019 and has been living abroad, denies any wrongdoing through supporters who say that the case is politically driven. The prosecutors also asked for long jail terms for other defendants, but no final verdict date has been set. Now, I'm joined by Tim Klustner. He's a policy analyst, Public Policy in Africa Initiative. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dasha.
It's a pleasure. Now, Tim, the indictment mentions homicide, rape, and torture. I know we've spoken about Joseph Kabila before, but can you point to the specific incidents or even witnesses that actually tie those acts to Kabila personally?
No, so that is probably the biggest issue with the prosecution as it stands is the charges are heavy on implication, but light on publicly disclosed information, as you say, directly, personally tying former President Joseph Kabila to instances of rape, instances of homicide, instances of other war crimes. The tenor of the charges so far reads as Kabila is an inciting force for M23. The challenge for prosecutors, if they are attempting to move forward with a capital punishment sentence against the former president, will probably have to disclose publicly causal information that this might be military orders or financial disbursements that causally tie Kabila to specific atrocities. Would be an essential portion for this prosecution to continue.
All right, Tim. Now, the Senate stripped his senator for life immunity so that he could be prosecuted. Would you say that the removal was carried out according to the Constitution and according to legal norms? And also, why is he being tried, or is this being tried in a military court instead of a regular civilian court? Do you think that this particular choice changes the kinds of protection that the defendants get?
Sure. So the tension here is everything that the Tshisekedi administration has done thus far is technically constitutional. So there's a sequence of events that is important to understand here. In March, the national moratorium on capital punishment was lifted. Congo hasn't executed a person since 2003. So in March, the moratorium on capital punishment was lifted. In May, Kabila's personal immunity, political immunity was lifted. That would sort of made way for this death penalty demand to be brought in court in a constitutional, potentially legislative way. I will say that Kabila's supporters and international observers have questioned the sequencing, the tight sequencing of especially the lifting of the moratorium on capital punishment, and then the immediate personal targeting of Kabila by lifting his own personal immunity. I think it will be difficult to argue that those were done purely out of a place of impartiality on the part of Tshisekedi and his administration.
All right. Now, the thing is, Kabila is not in court. Do we know where he is? What has he been done? What has been done to bring him in so that he can defend himself? Where is he at the moment?
Kabila's presence is unknown. For the last some years, he's been in exile in South Africa and has, up until earlier this year, kept a quite a low public profile. He was seen in Goma and last May. That's the capital of North Kivu province in eastern DRC. But currently his presence is unknown.
Okay. Now, we have prosecutors say that he supported the M23 rebels, while others say that he was trying to negotiate and not necessarily, supported them. So what do you say? Is there hard proof that links him to material or command support for the M23?
I think, again, the tension for this case is the Auditor General, the prosecution appears to is speaking as if they have definite causal links between Kabila and M23 leadership, for example. And I think that if that causal link is so clear to prosecutors, then it should be articulated transparently and publicly. I think that would go a long way to dispelling any objection that this prosecution of Kabila is politically motivated. I think it would highlight the impartiality of the Tshisekedi administration. I think it would harmonize with their anti-impunity stance that has garnered them some admiration in the international community. But I think the critical piece is, especially when pursuing such unprecedented capital punishment against a former head of state, is to ensure that this saga cannot be sort of co-opted by supporters or used to further inflame, insurgent tensions in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I think the way to undercut that risk is by transparently releasing information to the public.
All right. Now, what about the fact that some civil parties are demanding huge reparations? Because reports also did mention that they're demanding about $24 billion. What are your thoughts on this?
Again, so the $24 billion to me seems to be a estimation of it's a civil party claim that seems to estimate the total amount of damage for the M23 campaign in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo since the beginning of this year, since January 2025. Estimated, as you say, at about $24 billion. About 3,000 people have been killed, around 7 million people have been displaced. Undoubtedly, it's a humanitarian catastrophe. And the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo has experienced unrest for decades at this point. I think the question becomes, is Kabila a singular individual who, again, like we said, has been in exile, self-imposed exile, in low public profile in South Africa? Is Kabila truly the driver of the coalition gains that we've seen in Eastern DRC? Is he singularly responsible for M23's ability to capture both provincial capitals of North and South Kivu, Goma, and then Bukavu in less than 2 months, which they did in January and February? And I think the argument would be he's probably not on the ground. He's not tactically involved in operational planning as far as we can tell so far. And my worry here is that focusing inordinately on the former head of state flattens the complexity of the conflict and also the real grievances that Congolese people have in Eastern DRC, as well as their real agency in themselves, generating a robust resistance to Kinshasa.
But is it possible to do that, considering the humanitarian statistics, being cited, say that roughly 3,000 people were killed and 7 million people were displaced this year? What about the responsibilities, if any? What responsibilities does the prosecution say that Kabila bears, for these deaths and also these displacements?
Right. So the case currently needs to clarify that Kabila had a causal link in terms of he is sending military orders, he's providing military material or munitions directly to rebel groups in order to get this capital punishment charge to stick not only domestically but also to appear impartial relatively in the international sphere. Again, my worry is that the focus on Kabila ignores broader structural factors that have fed into this conflict. So, for example, the much more clearly articulated in a public sense link between, for example, the Rwandan executive branch and M23 elements has been elucidated multiple times by the United Nations and various other local and regional oversight bodies. And I think the focusing on an individual, again, to me, risks flattening and reducing the crisis to a sort of great man struggle or understanding of history. And I think that there are real systemic factors, that there's real transnational, between Rwanda and the DRC is, Kigali seems to be working within the borders of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That is a breach of the DRC's sovereignty, and I think could form the basis of a coordinated humanitarian response, potentially. I think attempting to stick questionable causal charges on a single individual is hard, and I think it to me doesn't strike me as the best way of getting humanitarian aid on the ground is by pursuing this singular sort of personal charge against the former president.
All right, team. Now, let's, while we wrap up this show, speak to us. What are your thoughts, especially if a former head of state is convicted and faces the death penalty? What precedent does that set for the DRC and the wider region? And also, if you could tell us, do you think that a severe sentence, a death sentence, or even the trial itself undermines the fragile peace efforts, with armed groups in the East?
Yeah, I think all of those are really good questions. I think that I will say that, yes, I would imagine that in the short term, achieving the death penalty and setting it against Kabila would, in the short term, generate potentially urban unrest where his networks hold sway, specifically serve as a flashpoint. In the eastern DRC, I don't see how it wouldn't be co-opted as a narrative of executive overreach as fuel for further rebel coalition building. I also, from an international perspective, I doubt that the Western media would treat this story with enough nuance to provide a fair hearing on both sides. I imagine that people would pick up on the short timing, the sequencing of events, from the lifting of capital punishment, the lifting of his personal immunity, of Kabila's personal immunity, and then the leveling of the death penalty charges against the former president. I imagine that narrative would be sort of flattened as a Tshisekedi regime or administration takes a hard line turn, takes a regime-like turn.
All right.
And I think that
sadly, team, so sorry, but time has actually run out, and we have to wrap up this show. Thank you so much, Tim Klustner, policy analyst, a public policy in Africa initiative, for joining us and speaking to us on this.
Thank you for having me, Dashin.
Thank you.